Hello, my name is Ben Keys, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Stroud at the moment and how we can facilitate a process to incorporate the projects I'm laying out in New Moses with the locality, starting with Stroud and the local area and this community in Amberley where I live. Um, we want to send out a signal basically throughout this community, really, to start saying, this is serious what I'm doing here. It really is something that is being held in high esteem by various people, but many people across the earth. But more so in the locality of this community, I think we have to actually start creating a network of people who are going to administer to this location and start to implement the process of developing into a cosmic reality in this zone. I've told a lot of people around the area. I'm starting to go out and talk to people in the area about what my plans are. Basically, the creative side of it, the creative ops of it, and everything that I've been configuring on my servers and setting up to put my creative knowledge through the system and set it up as a network that completes the reality as we see it unfold. I've finished this, so we need to get to the stage where we start to link to people in this community and explain to them basically how grassroots reality, grassroots creativity is going to affect their lives, affect their quality of living, and everything else in this community. Because a lot of people here, especially in this village, are very worried about Brexit and can't really get their heads out from underneath themselves, as it were, because they're too worried about the fact that um, you know. We're going to lose out as a country. But they don't see the real plan that Brexit is happening because the implementation of grassroots ENA in Gloucestershire and all the surrounding counties is about to be put in place. And I say to these people in this community, the vast majority of us who know about this happening, and especially those who have a key role in helping configure and lay the infrastructure, the network to create such an event, with the overall architecture that Mosrus and SAFCOMs are implementing. Um, I think a lot of people need to realise um, that this process is actually happening, and it has always been ordained to happen since the beginning of time. I think there are a lot of people who are doubting the fact that we can do it and have the capabilities and implementation to put it in place. And I think there are also a lot of people who just don't know that it's going to happen. The whole idea of Umosrus and SAFCOMs, rather than making a big announcement to the world back in 2012, whenever it was, 2011, when I first started creating my technology outfit to start implementing the change and the reality of stopping consumer restraints, removing microchips, removing problems in the system, faults in the system that was stopping people get on and get above the crystal ceiling and move forwards. There are a lot of people who I was trying to reach out to and explain my story to. And to start off with, I started in a bit of a cack-handed sort of way. I started to put out websites that gave my whole life story, and there's a bit of a sob story and that sort of thing, and it didn't really work. And I think the first people who saw the first few websites were a little bit put off that I put on UCOS, maybe. But that wasn't necessarily people in this community. It was people in London or people I was connected to from before who aren't necessarily relevant in my life anymore. Um, but in this local community, the vast majority of people have just let me get on with the process of doing what I'm doing with a minimum amount of uh, overall surveillance on what I'm doing, overall regard for what I'm doing. Most of them are so preoccupied with the minutiae that I'm putting in place and worrying about every little thing that I do that they can't see the bigger picture, and they can't see any physical implementation of architecture and the creation of heaven or Ina. So, getting back to my subject that I was talking about, when I first implemented this, rather than making a big announcement to the world saying that I had ambitions on the Vatican and I was going to create heaven, I had no such interest in implementing something that is airy fairy and ephemeral, and something that basically I had no right to call my own. You know, to call it heaven is not necessarily my role. It's like I said, if this is first heaven, it's like in by eighth heaven, we look back at it and we sort of think, yeah, that's when heaven started to come to the earth. I suppose it was Abel City and Ina, first city of universal creation. But actually, you know, when we go back in time far enough to these times, I started to set out my accounts on LinkedIn. I started to connect to people um, who I was formerly friends with and make associations. And I started to build a business on LinkedIn. I started to make it sort of, you know, like see what happens, you know, build it as I go along and turn it into something possibly, you know, with the creative realities from the previous 10 years and everything that I was implementing on the servers and everything else in something that could be more tangible to the business market, make it into some kind of business, sell it as a business, make it profitable. You know, it's very important. All Gnostics realize profitability. There's nothing wrong with that. Profitability is a good thing for the wider community, for yourself and everything else. It's enriching. What's the point of doing something if it's not profitable? If it's just a drain on the resources or something, you know, that doesn't necessarily pull its weight in terms of contributing to society. And so I decided to set it up as some kind of business outfit, which became Umosras ultimately, with SAFCOM's as sort of media arm and communications infrastructure on the IPv XYZ network, and ultimately which became the Space TM. But what I'm talking about with the business model of the whole platform was that, you know, think of Umosras like an umbrella of seniority that encompasses a large amount of businesses in the local community that amplify and resonate with international business all over the world. And ultimately, you know, although they may not be the place where this business started up, ultimately, when we go through the academy, you go through seniority in the academy, you become a practice owner or a practice manager, or you operate in a practice. You'll have been through the knowledge acquiescence database, and ultimately the universal reality, which will push through the crystal ceiling, means that the person who is the pioneer of this thought had thought of it after the initial infrastructure, the business, and everything else was set up. This is very much the way I formed myself as I went through the creative ops. I wasn't actually permitted to act and work in anything that seemed to be a project that was emanating from me. First, I was just made, then I just got on with it. I started to do more and more work and you know, implementation of things that I wanted to put in place, and you know, I just let it get taken away from me. I let people caretake the practices as they started to become fulfilled. And you know, it wasn't until 2010 that I decided to draw the whole creation to me and go to France to start to implement something there. I was naturally drawn back to my local community. I think people were dismayed to see me go, everything that I've been doing, and all the well wishers didn't want to see me go, and I was drawn back to the community. I couldn't get out of that. And so I decided to draw back the creativity of this local community, and then I got into the stage of setting up a business and working, irrespective of how I was doing it, how I was working with rudimentary systems and implementing like mobile phone signals through an arc web that I was setting up with sort of monolith technologies to remove consumer restraints and set up a whole network, an arc web, if you like, throughout the whole community where I could trace the reality and the network, the hex files and everything else at a later date when I was using my servers and using public IP addresses and everything else with proxies, DNS, and all the other infrastructure. Ultimately, the IPv4 system, which is able to run and manage the whole process of communications infrastructure without actually using the internet. Through the whole network of the arc web that had been initially laid out and planned by me back in 2010. But you know, the reality, what it seemed to be, was that what we're going to do is make the location of this platform, which is going to become Able City and Ina, we're going to make it into a business collaborative that is a sort of amnesty on the planet, living alongside Earth erstwhile people who live on this earth and do their duties as earthly citizens. There's going to be an amnesty for people to move into the universal agenda in on the planet, right at the center of the Western world, and to incorporate a collection of businesses that ultimately had their pioneer roots from the offshoots of what was going on at the academy in the process of moving students through to seniority to become seraphim, if you like, as I call them. The vast majority of the seniors topped out at seraphim. That's the plan, and the implementation of the business was going to mean the existing legal infrastructure was going to caretaker these businesses that will be represented mainly in the mountains of and also in the central zone and the location in the actual city and outer realm villages and practices within the whole patchwork of the reality. So, it was going to be a business amnesty, it's going to be a sports amnesty, it's going to be everything to move things towards universal direction, while at the same time linking in with a whole host of universal phenomena from off-world space programs. We're talking more in the initial phases about more connection to do with the secret space programs, or the things that have been going on since World War II and the continuation of World War II into the universe, dark side of the moon stuff and everything else. But the reality that we're trying to purvey to the rest of the world is like an alliance style reality where we have our own space program, And in the last 2 or so years, maybe 4 years, I've been sort of moonlighting with NASA and trying to, get their attention and getting kudos and good vibes back from them a lot of the time. And slowly, the third party of this, so there's like the secret space programs, and there's the alliance, and then there's the final stage, which is our close association. And luckily, this great fellow came into my life. Elon Musk started to be at the center of my attention. He showed interest in what I was doing. I showed interest in what he was doing. He showed interest in the local area, and SpaceX became like something that I could moonlight with and trial operations to bring about an equilibrium from the secret realities of the space programs to link us up and bring us into erstwhile created. This is where it's another amnesty. We get the whole NASA emporium come into the mainframe and to become something that we can work on to engender a space program from our operation here in ENA. So naturally that's business, it's space, it's something that the Earth has done to try and boldly strike out and make moves towards becoming a spacefaring nation, which is vitally important and something I greatly believe in. I think we need it out loud and proud. We need a non-covert ops space program that doesn't use secret portals protected by the military and everything else. I think we need a free system where people, ordinary lay people can, if they have a vocational calling to get into NASA or into these space programs, they can go in there, train, become disciplined, and work on the system, in some form or another, possibly even becoming an astronaut, which is every young boy's dream, I think. I don't think there are many people on this planet and girl, every young boy and girl wants, in America certainly, and in the rest of the world, I think, our hearts are all with them. Most people on this planet, think that space reality is the future. We're in the space age, and we've got to embrace that. The third factor was the technological part of this, which also I have started to come sort of master in a more technological way in over the last, rather than rudimentary phases, which were working, although not actually as precise and accurate as using command line language and getting to the next step, which is setting up your own servers and hosting VPS systems and all that sort of thing, which is the plan for Server the Village. But the reality of what we want to do with the technological reality, remit is, prior to say 5 years ago, heaven was in my architectural designs was lovely, white, beautiful sustaining place of the tree of life and everything else, and all the beauty of it, and the landscapes and the mountains. It was much smaller. There wasn't so much work, but there's a vast array of amnesty being implemented in the architectural design and everything else, which means it needs a slight dystopic reality. It needs an edgy feel to it. It needs an underplate, an underworld, or a think tank, or whatever it may be, to give the vast majority of the citizens who live here. And it's going to be megalithic in proportion. It's going to be absolutely huge, monolithic in proportion. It's going to be huge. It's going to be as big as you can possibly imagine on this planet. It's not just phenomenal. It's also the fact that it's more than phenomenal. It's super phenomenal because it's going to have a reality where from space you won't be able to see more than just the sort of outlines of some sort of construction in the location where we are. But actually, when you get in there, it's the whole landscape will change, and dimensions, proportions, and everything else. It's not just designed on physical hard structure and engineering, although the links to engineering do come from certain space programs where the inner core of Nibiru, say, is habitable and was channeled out, whereas the process we're pipelined into the Nibiru in some kind of off-world space program, and as the engineer in that process, and we started to hewn out the reality of Platform One within Nibiru to dock Nibiru on the planet, and then for locate the reality of this platform through something that seems to just manifest itself like pure magic. But if you go into the bare bones of the structure and look into the space programs, people are more intuitive, more empathetic, and sort of perceive the realities that they're in when they go through these out of body experiences, or transition from one side of the arc to the other. Like you have the white arc where you come from, or intend to aspire to get to if ever you get to the white arc. And the only way to do that is to put yourself last, go to the black arc, go through hardship, go through self-sacrifice and possibly death, and then come back from that and experience the whole rich reality of what having a future as someone who may go on with more life than just a normal human being. This process is a transition into the universal reality. Because in space programs, a lot of witnesses attest to the fact that extraterrestrials have immortality beyond your wildest imagination. It's because they are free from the constraints of the earthly laws that have governed us, because of the fact that the human being, the human condition, is not yet quite enlightened enough or knowledgeable enough to be able to get to the situation where they can have an eternal life or a long, long life. Now, if you look at the process, if you look at the Gnostic process, for all of you Gnostics out there, the way to immortality is through absolute knowledge. If you have absolute knowledge, maybe a vast number of things, you can never have knowledge, perception of the future, perhaps, but there is the chance to have enough knowledge to be able to take on board anything and understand it instantly and understand what it means, even the subliminal things and everything else. Then the whole process of the monolithic conversion, the whole Sierra project, is a process about blanking your mind, returning to source, and putting yourself to the back of the queue, losing all your attributes, your world attainment, and your friends, everything, losing all that, and becoming renewed by being connected to the spirit of the universe. That's complexity. And ultimately, if there are more than 50 platforms on the planet, so there are thousands of platforms that spin off from First Heaven and the whole Commonwealth, then there are all these people will have connected to a different portal within a universe, within our universe mainframe that we actually live in, that we call our universe. It's a multiverse, really. But actually, all these platforms at every tier of level reality, of the heavenly reality as we go up the scale, will be a commonwealth for each level up the tier. So there will be thousands and thousands of platforms, not only on this planet, but also ultimately in space. That's the purpose of having a space program, to further the reality and to implement our creativity and communication skills that we have developed in order to create this creativity. In other words, knowledge, our knowledge, and set up something that is way beyond the reasonable bounds of a mortal plan. I mean, to plan to retirement and then stop is not enough for me. I mean, there are not enough hours in the day for me to work. I just work all the time. I love it. I'm not just a workaholic. I like to go out, meet people, and everything else. And the whole social aspect is important, especially when we're starting to talk about things that can become implemented. But the whole purpose is, at the point when I realized longevity could be possible through absolute knowledge, I started to get into, the phase, having experienced death and resurrection from death at the beginning. I started to get into the phase where I could realize, actually, if we go out there and take as many risks as possible, don't be afraid of anything that is standing in your way, just move forward, and fight on until you reach the white arc. And that ultimately is more than just the hardship you put yourself under, or the stress you put yourself under to get yourself to the black arc. It is a positive, filling your whole mind and ultimately your whole body with information that you have learned from within yourself. The knowledge comes from within you. It doesn't come from without you. And this is the problem with the human condition. And this is what people are going to wake up to, the change into having your own information, your own argument about why you exist, what your reason for existence is, why you're here, what your purpose is, what your effect on other people is, who your friends are, who the people who you choose as friends once your reset has happened. Enlightenment is the key here, and if you can enlighten other people and other people like what you're doing, then you too become enlightened by people who are in a similar process, a monolith conversion or whatever it may be, however they've done it. There are 6 million ways to skin a cat. There are so many ways that it is possible that this process could have been implemented by a huge variety. There's no point viewing someone who's done the whole process and trying to emulate or copy their whole process, because all that does is turn you into a machine. And by the way, we're going to have plenty of those too, mostly with the Christian AI remit. So the whole reality, what I'm trying to say, sorry about going on for so long about this, but the whole reality of what we're trying to achieve is that basically, when you realize that longevity could be an option for you and other people, you're able to implement and show the way and get them to move towards the process that you went through to get into some kind of spiritual odyssey where you start to realize there's more than just this planet, and there's more going on inside you, and the knowledge becomes absolute. Then what you have to start to look for is a zone to privilege and protect your friends, your circle of friends and people who you have influenced. And you have to start to make something like what I call a safe haven, or a safe haven, I call it, in the location where you live, or in somewhere where you spent most of your life, or you're mostly connected to. And that way, the islands of creativity start to fill up the whole cosmos ultimately. And, moving away from what is tried and tested and mechanically built and put in place and constructed and worked on and drilled down on and everything else, we do all that in universal architecture and creativity anyway. It's very robust, starts rudimentarily, but it is very robust and sequenced in a way that means it's continually evolving and growing and changing in variety, but at the same time having methodical process, and a lot of thought put into it, and ideas spun off and shared through a networking of people with like-minded ideas. So what I'm trying to say is, we've got to the stage where we've gone through the crystal ceiling, okay, and we've got to that stage, and at this point, you've got to ask yourself, are we the new extraterrestrials, the new people to explore space, to make our space program happen? And wouldn't that be great if there were zones across this Earth that sprung out of universal cyber dimensional escalated creation, or the whole creative reality that I'm trying to platform and demonstrate with Eumosrus, Able City, and Ina, so other people can try the same thing and do. The idea is not just give in and say, well, that person can do it all. The idea is to go and put yourself somewhere else in the world, learn a bit about what's going on in this community with what I'm doing here and what's really going on, rather than looking at the nitty gritty and getting bogged down in the detail. Much more important to see the bigger picture and see how you can implement it. Maybe you'll bring something fresh. Maybe you'll bring something better than what I'm doing. And that's the whole process. That's the whole idea. It's not about just sitting around complaining about the government and not getting on. If you're not happy with it, go off somewhere and go somewhere where your heart is set on becoming something more of an explorator or a pioneer, and make it happen there. This is the world we live in. Go home, go back to where you came from, and start to implement something there. You've learned enough in this community, a lot of you, and some of you have a lot more to learn and want to learn more and want to be part of the overall picture of your Muslims. I'm happy with that. But there are some people who don't do enough because they feel everything's being done and they can't get on and do it themselves. Well, that's not an attitude to have. No one should have that attitude in this community. If you want to do something, do it. And don't think about it. As soon as it comes into your head, just do it. That's the only thing I can say. If you get the initiative to start something, it can have positive effects for everyone around you. Just believe in yourself for a short time, maybe 20 years, 10 years, whatever, and learn from within yourself. And suddenly you will have ideas beyond human comprehension. You will have to build systems to contain your ideas. This is the whole process. This is the whole way the network works. And in a business reality, you know, this is how it's going to work. So if we are the new ET with potentials for space exploration and longevity and everything else through science or through our own endeavor or through absolute knowledge, whatever it may be, then the reality that we're bringing to the rest of the world is, you know, something that is massively phenomenal, not physically constructed on this planet, okay, and something that, like if ET came to us and showed us some of their technology, instead of being able to explain it, we would only be able to put it down to being magic. Okay, you have to wing it a bit. You have to be able to move forwards with the legal organizational direction. To drill down all the time and ask why, and deconstruct is not the future way. The future way is not to ask questions, just to get on and make things happen. God bless you all.